The doctors
Oh
told Thomas Garrett
my
that he should have
God.
been dead for 15 minutes before anyone found him. They said the human body cannot survive that long without oxygen, without help, without someone calling for an ambulance. But Thomas had survived, not because of medicine, not because of luck, not because of anything that science could explain properly in a hospital room with charts and monitors beeping. Thomas had survived because something with 4 legs and a twisted bone had decided to stand over him while he was dying. And that decision, that simple choice by an animal that nobody wanted, would expose a secret that an entire town had been keeping. It would destroy the comfortable lies that people tell themselves about looking away. And it would prove that sometimes the smallest, most broken creature in the world understands mercy better than anyone else. This is the story of how that happened. Thomas Garrett was 71 years old, and for the last 43 years, he had walked the same road every single morning. The road belonged to Miller Ranch, the biggest cattle operation in the county. Thomas was the kind of man that ranches needed, but never quite respected. He was the one who fixed fences, who moved cattle, who understood the land the way people understand old houses they have lived in forever. He knew where the ground would be soft after rain. He knew where the rattlesnakes liked to hide. He knew the personality of each section of fence, which posts were starting to rot, which gates stuck in the summer heat. His body had been strong once. The kind of strong that comes from doing physical work every single day of your life. But his body had been keeping secrets. His heart had been keeping the biggest secret of all. On Tuesday morning, the sky was still dark when Thomas left his house. The sun was maybe 30 minutes away from coming up. The temperature was already 85 degrees. In West Texas, the heat doesn't wait for the day to officially begin. It just starts rising from the earth, patient and relentless, the way hunger works in the stomach of something that hasn't eaten in days. Thomas wore his same uniform. Brown work shirt, faded from hundreds of washings. Jeans with a rip on the left knee, where he had caught it on barbed wire 3 years ago and never bothered to fix it. Boots that had been resoled so many times, they were more memory than leather. His hat was tan, the color of dust, the color of everything in that part of Texas. His face was the same color, too. 71 years of sun exposure had made his skin look like it had been cooked slowly, deliberately, the way you would cook something you wanted to preserve. He had brought coffee in a thermos. He had thought about breakfast, but decided against it. His stomach had felt strange for about a week. Not sick exactly, just strange. Like something inside was shifting around, looking for a place to settle. Thomas had decided to ignore it. He was good at ignoring things. Most men from his generation were. You ignored pain. You ignored problems. You kept working until you couldn't work anymore, and then you sat down to rest, and then you died. That was the plan. That was how it was supposed to work. But plans change on dusty roads in Texas on Tuesday. Mornings when the heat is already starting to murder, the day before it has a chance to live. Thomas made it about 6/10 of a mile from his house. He was thinking about the water trough in the north pasture. The cattle had been drinking faster than the trough could refill, which meant something was broken in the system. He was thinking about how he would need to check the pump, would need to spend maybe an hour with his hands in the machinery, trying to figure out what Miller Ranch had done wrong this time. He was thinking about fixing things. He was thinking about work. He was not thinking about his heart. He was not thinking about the fact that one of his arteries had been slowly closing for 15 years, getting narrower and narrower, like a river, choking to death on its own minerals and calcium, and all the things that accumulate when you don't take care of yourself. He was not thinking about the fact that this morning, finally, with the heat and the exertion and the simple accident of being alive at the exact wrong moment, his heart was going to say no. His left leg stopped working first. It was like someone had cut the wire that connected his brain to his foot. One step his leg was there, holding him up, participating in the act of walking. The next step, it just wasn't. It was like his body had decided. Suddenly, and without warning, that it wasn't going to cooperate anymore, that it was done, that it was time to stop. Thomas fell the way heavy things fall. There was no grace to it. There was no slow descent. He just dropped, his body hitting the hard caliche of the ranch road. His glasses flew off. His hat flew off. His thermos of coffee flew off and landed 3 feet away, the lid popping off, the coffee spilling into the dust and being absorbed immediately, becoming part of the earth again. The impact knocked the wind out of him. His right arm twisted underneath him at an angle that Payne immediately objected to. His temple caught the edge of a rock. Not a big rock, but rocks are hard, and when your head hits them at force, they don't care how big they are. Blood came. It came fast, and it came warm, and it mixed with the dust and his sweat, creating the smell of something ending. His chest was doing things it had never done before. It was tightening. It was squeezing. It felt like something heavy was sitting on him, something that weighed more than he could move, something that was slowly crushing him flat against the ground. Thomas opened his mouth to breathe, and his breathing sounded like something dying. Not metaphorically, actually dying. A sound like an animal makes when it's being hunted, when it's running out of time, when it understands that the body is no longer cooperating with the brain's desire to survive. His vision was starting to get dark at the edges. The sun was coming up now, finally, and it should have been beautiful. Those first moments of gold light hitting the landscape, boo. Thomas couldn't appreciate it because his eyes were closing, because his body was shutting down the systems it didn't think it needed for living. He was alone on the road. He was 71 years old. He was bleeding into the dust. He was dying, and nobody knew. Nobody was coming. The ranch didn't expect him to check in. His daughter lived 2 hours away. He had no wife to wonder where he was. He had no one to notice for hours, maybe for a whole day. This is when it should have ended. This is when Thomas Garrett should have become a story that people told about the old ranch hand who had a heart. Attack on the property, about how they found him 3 days later, about how if only someone had been there, if only someone had checked on him. This is when Thomas should have become another small tragedy that a town mentions and then forgets. But something was coming down that road, something that nobody expected, something that would change everything. The sound came before anything else. Thomas heard it first, even though his eyes were closing and his body was shutting down. It was a sound that didn't belong on this road at this time of morning. It was the sound of something moving, something limping, something that was trying to walk, but the walk was wrong. The sound was the irregular rhythm of hooves hitting the hard ground, and the rhythm was broken. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps, skip, 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. Like a piece of music that kept missing a beat, that kept falling out of time with itself. Thomas couldn't see what was making the sound. His eyes were almost closed now. The world was just a blur of dust and light, and the pain that was still sitting on his chest like a thing with weight and intention. But his ears still worked. His ears still understood what they were hearing. There was something coming toward him. There was something moving down this road where nothing should be moving at this hour. The hooves got closer. Thomas could feel the vibration of them in the ground underneath him. The earth was shaking slightly with each step, each uneven step, like the beating of something's heart. It was struggling to keep time. And then the shape appeared. Thomas's vision was too blurred to see it clearly, but he could see the outline. He could see it was a horse. He could see it was young. He could see that something was wrong with the way it moved. The foal was chestnut-colored, the kind of reddish-brown that looks almost gold when the sunlight hits it right. But this foal's coat was not shiny. It was dull and matted, the way a horse's coat gets when it has been living rough, when it has been exposed to weather and dirt and the hard life of survival. The foal's ribs were showing, not slightly. They were showing clearly, like the bones were trying to push their way out through the skin, like the animal was made mostly of frame and not much else. The foal's back right leg was twisted. Not broken, but twisted in a way that meant the hoof pointed at an angle, that hooves were not supposed to point. It was the kind of leg that told a story about pain, about being born wrong, about carrying something your whole life that you never asked to carry. The foal was limping badly. Each time that twisted leg had to take weight, the foal would shift quickly to the good legs, moving faster, moving desperate. Skip, skip, dot, but the foal kept moving toward Thomas anyway. It didn't stop. It didn't turn around and go back to wherever it had come from. The foal just kept walking, uneven and difficult, toward the old man bleeding in the dust. Thomas tried to move. He tried to lift his hand. He tried to make any kind of sound that would indicate that he was alive, that he was a human being, that he needed help. But his body wasn't listening to his brain anymore. His brain was sending messages, and his body was ignoring them. His hands stayed on the ground. His mouth stayed open. His eyes stayed almost completely closed. The foal was very close now. Thomas could smell it. Horses have a particular smell. It's not a bad smell. It's earthy and warm and familiar if you have lived around animals long enough. But this foal smelled like something else too. It smelled like loneliness. It smelled like fear. It smelled like an animal that had been running, that had been hiding, that had been trying to survive without the things animals usually have. There was no mother's smell on this foal. There was no other horse's comfort smell. There was just wildness and isolation. Dot. The foal stopped walking when it got to Thomas. It stood about 3 feet away, favoring 3 legs, letting the twisted leg hang, taking no weight on it. The foal's head came down, slowly, carefully. The foal was investigating. Horses investigate things by smell. They understand the world through their noses, the way humans understand it through their eyes. The foal's nose came down toward Thomas's face. Thomas's eyes were almost completely closed now. He could see just a sliver of movement. He could see the shape of the foal's head coming down. He could feel the warm breath of the animal on his face. He could feel the soft nose investigating his face, his cheeks, his forehead, the blood on his temple. The foal was not gentle exactly. It was not being kind in any way that a human would recognize as kindness. The foal was just doing what foals do. It was investigating. It was trying to understand what this thing was that had appeared on the road. But in that moment when a dying old man and a wild young horse were breathing the same air, when they were close enough to touch, something changed. Something shifted. Thomas understood suddenly that he was not alone. He understood that another living thing was aware of him. He understood that he existed in the presence of something else that was suffering, that was afraid, that was moving through the world without protection. The foal stayed there. It didn't run away. It didn't decide that this strange thing on the ground was too weird and leave. It just stood there, 3 good legs holding it up, 1 twisted leg hanging useless at its side, and it looked down at the old man who was dying. Thomas's heart was beating wrong. It was fluttering. It was stopping and starting. It was doing everything a heart should not do. He was slipping away. He could feel himself slipping. The darkness at the edges of his vision was getting bigger, getting closer, taking up more space. In a few more minutes, he would be gone. In a few more minutes, he would be dead on this road, and nobody would know what had happened. Nobody would ever know that his last moments on earth were shared with another creature that the world had decided was not worth saving. The foal's warm breath continued on his face. The foal's nose continued investigating. The foal stood there, in that moment, and did what no human being had done for Thomas in 43 years on this ranch. The foal stood with him. The foal was present. The foal was there. And somewhere in the darkness that was taking Thomas away, somewhere in that space between life and death, Thomas understood he was not the only broken thing standing on this road. He was not the only creature that the world had written off. He was not the only being who deserved to be left alone. Then everything went black. The pain stopped. The struggle stopped. The sound of the world stopped. There was just darkness, and the ghost feeling of warm breath on his face, and the knowledge that he had been seen by something that didn't judge him, that didn't try to fix him, that just stood there and bore witness to the fact that he was alive. For now. Thomas opened his eyes in a place that smelled like medicine and electricity and something else that he couldn't quite name. The ceiling was white. The walls were white. Everything was white except for the machines beside his bed, which were gray and black and had screens that showed numbers that changed every few seconds. He didn't understand what any of it meant. He just knew that he was alive, because dead people didn't wake up. Dead people didn't open their eyes and see white ceilings and feel the strange pulling sensation of tubes coming out of their arms and their chest and places he didn't want to think about too carefully. There was a doctor. The doctor was young, maybe 40, with tired eyes that suggested he had been awake for a very long time. The doctor was talking, explaining things. Thomas heard some of the words. Heart attack, massive blockage. Saved by emergency services. Lucky, very lucky. The word lucky appeared 3 times in what the doctor was saying, and each time it sounded like the doctor was trying to convince someone, maybe himself, that this was the right word for what had happened. You were found on Miller Ranch property, the doctor said. The ranch manager called 911. You were unconscious when the ambulance arrived. You had been on the ground for approximately 18 minutes before anyone found you. The paramedics were able to restart your heart. That's the only reason you're here. That's the only reason you're alive. Thomas tried to speak. His throat felt like it was made of broken glass. His voice came out as something between a whisper and a sound that a sick animal would make. But he had to ask. He had to know. The question was sitting in his head, pushing everything else out, demanding to be answered. The horse, Thomas whispered. There was a horse, a young horse. Did anyone see it? The doctor looked confused. He looked at the monitors beside Thomas's bed. He looked at the chart in his hand. He looked back at Thomas like he was trying to figure out if the old man's brain had been damaged by the lack of oxygen. A horse? The doctor asked slowly. Young horse, chestnut-colored, twisted leg, back right leg, limping. Did anyone see it? Thomas was desperate now. His hand moved, trying to grab the doctor's arm, trying to make the doctor understand how important this was. But his hand didn't have strength. His hand just shook and fell back onto the bed. I'm sure we can discuss this after you rest, the doctor said, and he said it in the voice that doctors use when they think a patient is confused. Your daughter is in the waiting room. I'll have her come in. Sarah came in 5 minutes later. She was Thomas's only child, and she looked the way children look when they realize their parents are mortal. She looked scared and angry and sad all at the same time. She held his hand carefully, like his hand was made of something that would break if she pressed too hard. She cried a little, then stopped. She told him he was lucky. She said it twice, like Thomas was asking about the horse again. There was a horse there, he said. His voice was stronger now, but it was still rough, still difficult. When I fell down, there was a horse with a twisted leg. It came and stood with me. Did anyone find it? Did anyone see it? Is it okay? Sarah exchanged a look with her husband, who was standing behind her looking uncomfortable. She squeezed Thomas's hand and said, Dad, I think the medication is making you confused. You were alone when David Chun found you. Just you. By yourself on the road. No, Thomas said. And he said it so clearly, so certainly, that something in Sarah's face changed. She stopped looking at him like he was confused. She started looking at him like he was telling the truth about something important. There was definitely a horse, a young one, twisted leg. It was there. I felt it. It stood over me. I felt its breath on my face. That's when Thomas started asking everyone who came into the room, the nurses, a physical therapist, the priest who visited even though Thomas hadn't been to church in 15 years. He asked every single person the same question. Did anyone see a young horse with a twisted leg? chestnut-colored. Was it found? Is someone taking care of it? Nobody had any answers. Nobody even knew what he was talking about. But somewhere in the hospital, somewhere in the machines and the tubes and the careful explanations of why he was alive when he should have been dead, the question was being repeated. Nurses were talking. A phone call was made. And somehow, the question traveled from the hospital to the newspaper office. Rebecca Martinez worked for the West Texas Chronicle. She had been a reporter for 7 years, and for most of those years, she had been writing stories about cattle prices and feed costs and ranch equipment. She had been writing stories that nobody really wanted to read, but that needed to be written for the paper to exist. Then she got a phone call from a nurse who had heard a story about an old man asking about a horse. And Rebecca understood suddenly that she might have something interesting. She went to Miller Ranch. She talked to David Shunn, the manager. David told her about finding Thomas on the road. David told her about the hoof prints in the dust. David told her something that didn't quite make sense, but that he believed was true. There were horse tracks around him, David said. Fresh ones, like something had been standing there, standing over him. I've been working with horses for 20 years, and I know what it looks like when an animal has been standing in one place. The ground tells you, the dust tells you, and that dust told me something had been there with him. Rebecca asked the question that nobody wanted to ask, the question that would change everything. What horse? She asked, does Miller Ranch have a young horse with a twisted leg? David's face changed. He got quiet. He looked like he was remembering something that he had been trying hard to forget. When he spoke again, his voice was different. It was the voice of someone who was ashamed. There was a foal, he said slowly, born about 9 months ago. It had a twisted leg. It wasn't going to be useful. The decision was made to. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Rebecca understood what the decision meant. The foal was supposed to be gone. The foal was supposed to be dead. But it's not dead? Rebecca asked. No, David said. It escaped, or we missed it. I don't know. But for the last 3 weeks, we've been looking for it. It's been loose somewhere on the property. Wild, scared, living rough. And nobody had any idea. He stopped. He looked at Rebecca. You think the foal was there? You think that's what Thomas saw? I think, Rebecca said slowly, that's exactly what happened. She wrote the story that night. It was small, just a few paragraphs in the ranch section of the paper. But the headline was big. Lost foal found with dying man. Coincidence or something more? The story talked about Thomas. It talked about the heart attack. It talked about the 18 minutes on the ground. And it asked the question that nobody had wanted to ask before Rebecca asked it. What happened to the foal? Where is the young horse that should have been dead 3 weeks ago? And why was it standing over Thomas Garrett when nobody else would? The question went into the newspaper. The newspaper went into people's homes. People read it while they drank coffee in the morning. People talked about it while they worked. People called their friends and asked if they had seen the story. And slowly, carefully, the question started to grow. The question started to spread. The question started to demand answers. And those answers, when they finally came, would destroy the comfortable silence that Miller Ranch had been counting on. The newspaper story was published on a Wednesday morning, and by Wednesday afternoon, Rebecca Martinez's phone had received 43 calls. By Thursday morning, it was over 100. People were calling from places she didn't even know read the West Texas Chronicle. People were calling from other states. People were calling because the question had done something powerful. It had made people care about a horse they had never seen. A horse that most people would never have thought about. A horse that the world had decided was not worth saving. Thomas heard about it from Sarah. She brought the newspaper to the hospital and read the article out loud, and when she finished, Thomas cried. Not because he was sad. He cried because someone had believed him. Someone had written down what he had said. Someone had taken the question seriously. Sarah held his hand and told him he needed to rest, but Thomas was thinking about only one thing. The foal was still out there. The foal was still alive. The foal was still wandering Miller Ranch, scared and hungry and alone, waiting for something to change. "I'm going to find it," Thomas said. His voice was not strong, but it was certain. "When I get out of here, I'm going to find that horse." "Dad, you almost died," Sarah said. "The doctors said you need to rest for months. You can't be walking around looking for a horse." "I have to," Thomas said simply. "It stood with me. It was there when nobody else was. I can't leave it out there alone." Thomas left the hospital 4 days later. The doctors did not want him to leave. They said his heart was still unstable. They said he needed more rest, more medication, more monitoring. But Thomas signed the papers that said he was leaving against medical advice. He put on his old clothes. He walked out of the hospital, leaning on Sarah's arm. And his first thought was not about his health. His first thought was about finding a young horse with a twisted leg. But the foal had become something bigger than just one old man's personal mission. The newspaper story had done something that Rebecca Martinez had not anticipated. It had started a conversation. People were talking. People were asking questions. People wanted to know, what happens to injured animals on ranches? Why was the foal supposed to die? Who made that decision? And why was no one talking about changing the way things worked? The Miller Ranch office started receiving calls on Thursday afternoon. Not friendly calls. Not the kind of calls from regular customers. These were calls from animal welfare organizations. These were calls from people who had read the story and were angry. These were calls that demanded answers. What happened to the foal? Was the foal still alive? What was Miller Ranch doing about it? Miller Ranch did not want to answer these questions. Miller Ranch wanted the story to go away. Miller Ranch wanted people to stop thinking about the foal, to stop asking what had happened, to go back to not caring about the things that happened on ranches when nobody was watching. But that was not going to happen. The question had gotten too big. The question had become a problem that could not be ignored. By Friday morning, local news stations had picked up the story. By Friday evening, a television crew was at Miller Ranch, asking David Chun questions about the foal on camera. David Chun looked uncomfortable. He looked like a man who had been comfortable with silence before, but silence was no longer an option. He told the camera crew that a foal had been missing. He told them that the animal had been injured. He told them that the animal had been missing for 3 weeks. But when the reporter asked him directly, "Did Miller Ranch intend for this foal to be dead?" David Chun could not answer. His face told the answer. His silence told the answer. The camera crew filmed his silence, and that silence was broadcast on the evening news. And silence on camera always looks like guilt. Thomas was watching the news at Sarah's house when he saw David Chun's face on the television. He saw the empty pasture behind him. He saw the reporter asking the question that nobody wanted to answer. And Thomas understood that the time for waiting was finished. The time for letting other people make decisions was finished. The foal had saved his life. Now he was going to save the foal's life. He called David Chun directly. His hands were shaking as he dialed, but his voice was steady when David answered. "I want to buy the foal," Thomas said. "Whatever price you want to name, I'll pay it. I want to take that horse off your property. I want to give it a home." There was silence on the line. Then David Chun said something that surprised Thomas. "I want to help you find it first," David said. "I've been thinking about this since the story came out. I've been thinking about what we did, what I let happen. I want to help you find that horse, and then I want to help you keep it." They searched on Saturday morning. Thomas, Sarah, David Chun, and 5 other ranch workers spread out across Miller Ranch property. They walked the pasture. They checked the creek beds. They looked in the small canyons where animals sometimes hide when they are afraid. Thomas moved slowly. His chest still hurt sometimes. His heart still felt uncertain. But he moved, because the foal was out there, and the foal was alive, and somebody finally cared enough to look. They found it just before noon. The foal was in a dry creek bed, standing in the shadow of a canyon wall, trying to stay cool. The foal's twisted leg was worse now. The foal had been limping for 3 weeks, and the constant strain had made the deformity more pronounced. The foal was thin. The foal was scared. The foal was tired. When the foal saw the people coming, it tried to run. But a foal with a twisted leg cannot run very fast. It moved, limping, desperate, but it could not escape. Thomas moved toward it slowly. He moved the way you move toward something that is afraid, the way you move when you want that something to know you are not a threat. The foal stopped running. The foal stood there, breathing hard, looking at the old man coming toward it. And something passed between them again, the same something that had passed on the road when Thomas was dying. Recognition, understanding, the knowledge that they both had been marked by the world as things that should not survive, and yet here they both were, surviving anyway. Thomas reached out his hand slowly. He did not try to grab. He just let his hand be there, open, offering nothing but presence. The foal came forward. The foal came slowly, limping on that twisted leg, and it let Thomas touch its neck. "It's okay," Thomas whispered. "It's okay. You're going to be okay now. I promise." The foal leaned into his head, and Thomas understood that the foal remembered him. The foal knew that this was the man from the road. This was the man who had been dying. This was the man that the foal had stood with. And now the man had come back. The man had come back to save the foal, the way the foal had saved the man. Sarah was crying. David Chun was crying. The ranch workers were standing quietly, watching this moment, understanding that something was changing. Something was shifting in the way they thought about animals. Something was shifting in the way they thought about responsibility. Something was shifting in the way they thought about what it meant to mark something for death, and then be forced to watch someone love it back to life. The foal was led off Miller Ranch property that afternoon. David Chun signed the papers. Miller Ranch let the foal go for $1, the smallest price possible, because they wanted the problem gone quietly. What they did not understand was that quiet was no longer an option. The story had already gotten out. The people already knew. And now they were waiting to see what would happen next. Thomas brought the foal to his small property behind his house. He gave it water. He gave it hay. He gave it shelter from the heat. And he gave it something more important than any of those things. He gave it a name. He called the foal Mercy, because mercy was what the foal had given him on the road, and mercy was what he was giving back now. And in that moment, when an old man and a young horse stood together on a small piece of land, something changed in the town. Something changed in the way people thought about the animals around them. Something changed in the way people thought about looking away. The silence was broken, and it would never be quite the same again. Mercy lived on Thomas's property for 6 years. Not the 6 years that the doctors had predicted Thomas would live. Thomas lived longer than that, lived to see things change, lived to understand that his heart attack on a dusty road had been the beginning of something that nobody could have imagined. The foal with the twisted leg became a symbol. Not because anyone planned for it to be a symbol, but because symbols have a way of happening when people are ready for them to happen. A sanctuary started small. It was just Mercy at first. Just Thomas and an old horse with a twisted leg, living on 2 acres of land behind a small house. But people started arriving. They started appearing at the fence, asking if they could see Mercy. They started bringing donations. Hay, money, veterinary care. A woman named Dr. Patricia Chun, no relation to David Chun, came from Midland and offered to work with Mercy's leg to see if corrective shoeing could help the foal's gait. The photographs started appearing on social media. Sarah, who was a teacher and knew how to use computers, had taken pictures of Thomas brushing Mercy. She had taken pictures of Mercy eating from Thomas's hand. She had taken pictures of the old man and the young horse standing together in the Texas sunlight, and she had posted them on Facebook. The pictures spread. They traveled from person to person to person. People who had never been to West Texas, people who had never seen a horse, people from all over the world saw those pictures and felt something break open inside them. The story changed people. That was the unexpected part. The story was supposed to be about a horse, but it turned out to be about something bigger. It was about the decision to care when it would be easier not to care. It was about the choice to look when it would be easier to look away. It was about the understanding that broken things still have value, that twisted legs still walk, that animals marked for death can teach us something about how to live. By the second year, there were 5 horses on the property. A Mare that was too old to have foals anymore. A stallion with advanced arthritis that moved like every step was a negotiation with pain. A pony with a skin condition that made its coat fall out in patches. A quarter horse that had been abused so badly it would not let anyone touch it except Thomas. And Mercy, the one who had started everything, the one whose twisted leg had become the most famous leg in West Texas. Thomas named the sanctuary the Broken Wing Farm, even though it had no wings, and no one could quite explain why. But people understood what he meant. They understood that broken didn't mean useless. They understood that a thing could be imperfect and still have worth. They understood that sometimes the broken things teach us the most important lessons. The news story grew. It went from the local newspaper to state news to national news. A documentary filmmaker came and spent 2 weeks filming Thomas and Mercy. The documentary was called The Foal That Saved a Life, and it premiered at a film festival, and people cried watching it. Schools brought classes. Children stood at the fence and looked at a horse with a twisted leg and understood, before anyone had to explain it to them, that this horse was important. Miller Ranch changed. The owner, pressure from public opinion and from insurance companies, and from the weight of knowing that the whole world was watching now, started working with animal welfare organizations. He implemented new protocols. Injured animals were no longer automatically sent to death. They were evaluated. They were given chances. They were assessed by veterinarians who asked the question, can this animal survive? Can this animal have a life? And if the answer was yes, the animal got to have that life. Other ranches started doing the same thing. What had been standard practice disposing of injured animals quickly and quietly started to become questioned, started to become examined, started to become something that people had to think about and justify, rather than something that just happened automatically in the silence. Thomas became a speaker. He went to ranching conferences and talked about Mercy. He went to animal welfare meetings. He went to schools. He moved slowly, his heart still uncertain, his body still reminding him that he had died once and come back. But he moved, and he talked, and he told people the simple truth. A horse saved my life. Not a perfect horse. Not a valuable horse. A broken horse saved my life, and I'm not going to forget that. By the 3rd year, there were funding requests. By the 4th year, there was a registered nonprofit. By the 5th year, there was a waiting list of horses that needed to come to the Broken Wing Farm. Abused horses, neglected horses, horses with injuries, horses that the world had decided were not worth saving. They all came. They all got shelter. They all got the chance that Mercy had gotten. Sarah left her teaching job and ran the sanctuary full-time. Her husband built more fences. Volunteers came from across the state to help. A local feed store donated hay. A veterinary clinic donated medicines. A farrier came every 8 weeks to work on hooves. A whole community built itself around the idea that broken things matter. But the heart of it was still Mercy, the foal with the twisted leg that had stood over a dying man and given him a reason to survive. Mercy lived to be 9 years old, which was a good long life for a horse. Mercy never ran perfectly. Mercy never did anything that a perfect horse could do. But Mercy walked. Mercy ate. Mercy stood in the sun on the property and existed, and that existence meant everything. When Mercy died on a quiet morning in spring, with Thomas's hand on her neck, the whole town grieved. Not just Thomas, not just Sarah, the whole town. Because Mercy had become something bigger than a horse. Mercy had become the reason that people started looking instead of looking away. Mercy had become the moment when a community decided that broken things mattered. Mercy had become the symbol of the possibility that even the smallest, most damaged creature can change the world. Thomas died 3 years after Mercy. His heart finally gave out, the way hearts do when they have been damaged and repaired and asked to work harder than they should. But he died knowing that the work would continue. He died knowing that the Broken Wing Farm would keep running. He died knowing that other horses would arrive, would be saved, would be given the chance that he and Mercy had given to each other. They buried Thomas on the property, in a small cemetery where his wife had been buried long ago. A bronze plaque was placed near the fence, facing the pasture where Mercy had lived. It read, Thomas Garrett. He chose to see. He chose to care. He chose to love something the world had marked for death. And that choice changed everything. The Broken Wing Farm still exists. It still rescues horses. It still teaches people that broken things have value. School groups still visit. Tourists still come to see the place where an old man and a foal saved each other. And people still stand at the fence and look at horses that limp, that move wrong, that carry the marks of suffering and survival. And they understand something important. They understand that mercy is not weakness. They understand that broken is not finished. They understand that sometimes the smallest, most damaged thing in the world understands grace better than anything else ever could. They understand that one person, one horse, one moment of choosing to care instead of looking away can echo forward forever, changing lives in ways that nobody could have predicted. And on dusty roads in West Texas, people still remember. They remember the foal that walked on 3 good legs and one that would never be quite right. They remember the old man who fell in the heat and the dust. And they remember that someone came. Someone stayed. Someone saw him when nobody else would. And that memory, that knowledge that we are not alone, that something cares, that something will stand with us when we are falling, that memory changes everything. That memory ripples forward through time. That memory becomes the reason that people choose differently, choose better, choose to look, choose to care, choose to save the broken things, because the broken things might be the ones who save us.